Epics. No matter the creatures I've created in the life simulation real-time strategy video game Spore, this foe has always gotten the better of me. Epics such as Mick Jagger, McAfee, and that one that killed Garks. My only option when faced with such monstrosity has been to run and hide. This had to stop, but to stand against such a powerful foe, I needed to create a creature of tremendous grit and fortitude, but something that no one would suspect, to afford me the element of surprise.
Surprise, motherfucker!
To find this creature, I turned to an untapped wealth of knowledge. Grandmas, generally dismissed due to their inability to use an iPhone or remember where they put their glasses, grannies were a repository of knowledge, rambling about the price of bread and bygone times of classic British puddings, ancient recipes passed down from one granny to the next, legends such as figgy pudding, treacle tart, and spotted dick, and perhaps one of the most potent, rhubarb crumble. How could anyone like such a bitter, fibrous vegetable? But just how powerful was this ancient plant? Were the grandmas onto something? And could it defeat the most epic creatures of its time? To find out, we would reenact the rhubarb's evolutionary journey, entering its genetic sequence into Spore. We would peer back through the sands of time, before iPhones, MOBAs, and boomers, to the very beginning. We would begin our simulation with this young rhubarb, called Rue. The rhubarb species seemed comfortable in their early stages, socializing and caring for their young. As was always the case in Spore, our creatures survive by destroying or befriending other creatures. Doing so would grant evolutionary upgrades, increasing the chances of survival. Everything seemed peaceful, with little sign that these creatures would eventually overcome the most dangerous predators on the island. After a few friendly encounters, the rhubarb were ready for their first evolutionary upgrades. It was written in grandma legend that rhubarbs were superb parents and very protective of their young. Oh cripes, where did that go? No matter, more rhubarb could be made. It wasn't long before the next generation of rhubarb took on a more familiar appearance. Keen to explore, this rhubarb felt the need to venture farther into unexplored areas of the island. He wasn't familiar with this area and stopped to eat a delicious fruit hanging nearby. From nowhere he heard a screech. A young child cried from the bushes and called him a fat weed. This rude child was playing with fire. The rhubarb was a larger creature, and this would be the first time we would see our rhubarb in combat. Rue struck first, kicking the youngster in the face. That'll teach him. While this seemed harsh, Spore was a cruel mistress where only the strong would survive. It was kill or be killed. If this youngster were to pick a fight with a fully grown rhubarb, he would have to be strong enough to deal with the consequences. Outmatched, the others ran. Rue set off in pursuit of the other younglings. It was hard work. He was slow-moving in comparison. He struck one in the back of the head. Despite their small size, these creatures put up a substantial amount of resistance, leaving Rue on low health. But he managed to get the better of his young opponent. However, with an angry nest of beans on his periphery, Rue sought some more food to replenish his health before trying his luck against them. The beans fought well. Rue collected the bones around their nest, granting him evolutionary secrets he could use on his next upgrade at the nest site. Suddenly, Rue was ambushed by a Zerb. Already on low health, Rue made a run for it, but the Zerb bested him, throwing him into the dirt. It was a humiliating lesson. Worse still, there were no signs here that a rhubarb would ever be able to defeat an epic creature, but there was still time. Perhaps the Rhubarb Saga would reveal more secrets. Rue befriended more and more creatures. Despite his limited combat prowess, many had never seen a vegetable that could sing and dance, earning Rue many friends. It wasn't long before this socialization practice brought the rhubarb to the next level. Rue had a breakthrough, a eureka moment. With all this socialization practice, the rhubarb species began coordinating in groups, and our rhubarbarian posse was now too strong. Not only this, with so many creatures having been surprised to see a vegetable sing and dance, he wondered what would happen if he didn't. What if he pretended to be what everyone expected him to be and became a plant? And as he did, something miraculous happened. He disappeared. The Zerb that caught him off guard previously had no idea he was there. With this new talent for stealth, Rue leapt from the shadows and struck the Zerb. Revenge, he cried. There were two rhubarbs now, strength in numbers. Surprised from behind by a plant, the Zerb yelled, "Ambush!" but it was too late. Using stealth to their advantage, a Rhubarb's element of surprise granted a significant trump card. Perhaps there was hope after all. Rue continued to persuade more Rhubarb to join his gang. He now had 3. It wasn't clear why Rue never managed to coerce a 4th Rhubarb to join his posse. Some grandmas speculate it was because he could only count to 3. Others say that Rhubarb hated math, as it gave them square roots. Either way, soon the Rhubarb were to have their first epic encounter. A Lommies, which had wiped out a neighbouring nest site. It was dangerously close to the Rhubarb children. Something needed to be done. With 3 Rhubarb gangsters in his group, it was time to test his mettle. Taking everything that they had learned thus far, the Rhubarb jumped into stealth and pounced on the Lommies. "Keep it away from the nest," Rue cried. Rue leapt behind it, far from the Lommies' savage bite. One Rhubarb was taken down with a single blow, followed by a second. "Leave them alone," Rue shouted, but it was no use, and as long as he kept moving, he couldn't use any of his attacks, all of which required him to stop and stand still. The final Rhubarb and his posse was killed. Only Rue had survived. With one final swift bite to the Lommie's backside, he danced his final dance before running for his life. This plan had failed. He made it back to the nest. A glance behind him revealed the epic had lost just 10% of its health. He would have to do better. This Grandma legend hadn't revealed anything significant. Perhaps combat perfection lay within a figgy pudding instead. But there was still time to finish the simulation. The Rhubarb continued to venture from nest to nest, kicking butt and taking names on a mission to find every conceivable upgrade a Rhubarb could. More and more epics began to show themselves. Rue needed a plan of defense. After befriending all the creatures in the local area and equipping as many upgrades as he possibly could, Rue was ready once more. After learning to shake his leaves a bit, he discovered he could fly, but what advantages might this bring him in combat? Mustering all his resolve, Rue and his posse set out to ambush an epic trigger morts, causing trouble with the locals. The Rhubarb were strong fighters, perhaps some of the best on the island, but they were no match. The Trigo decimated his friends. In frustration, Rue flew into the air with his leaves. He scaled the tallest volcano on the island and shook his leaves so hard he nearly took off into space. "Damn you," he cried. "I'll give anything to protect the children from those epics. Anything," before floating back to the ground. When he returned to the nest, all his fellow Rhubarb friends and family were gone. What had happened to them? Suddenly, a Rhubarb lady appeared from behind him. He'd never seen her before. She told him of an ancient prophecy woven like the threads of time and whispered from the lips of the wise. From the depths of Twilight Shroud, a voice foreboding echoes loud. All epic creatures must be slain, a Rhubarb's courage must not wane. O mournful tale of truth severe, if Rhubarb falls, no hope appears. In this dark verse we pray he thrives, so dawn may break and darkness dies. This prophecy had spoken our Rhubarb warrior to the core. Was Rue the Rhubarb in the prophecy? Regardless, this filled Rue with newfound courage. Rue gathered his strength. This time, Rue went straight for the high ground. Hocking up a massive ball of juice, he thrust it down on the nearest epic he could find. "Stay away from here," he cried. Enraged by this tiny plant's audacity, it roared up the hilltop to meet him. Frustratingly, one of his fellow Rhubarb died walking down a hill too fast. The other Rhubarb ran to help him and followed his fate. Damn it, he thought, and ran, kiting the epic across the map, hocking up a glob of juice behind him whenever possible. The epic was gaining on him. Would these be his final moments? He spat another bitter glob of Rhubarb juice and spun around. But as he turned around once more, he realized the epic had stopped. It wasn't attacking him, but standing still. The epic couldn't tell him apart from the other plants and vegetables. Accidentally stumbling on his perfect camouflage, our Rhubarb continued to spit juice, round after round. The epic seemed frustrated, couldn't seem to defend itself. For hours Rue spat, spitting juice all day and all night. Morning broke, and Rue was hungry. Would he starve from hunger before he could take down this epic? Then, the epic started moving towards the mountain. Out of nowhere, a friendly Rhubarb struck from behind. With the sun scorching behind him, Never mind. Hours passed. Rue spat round after round until finally, as a second night began to fall, the epic finally fell. He paid his respects to the fallen epic. Ashes to ashes, juice to juice. He rushed home to the nest to share the good news. In haste, he accidentally kicked a baby rhubarb flying out the nest and volleyed an egg into the forest. "My children," the mother rhubarb cried. "Why does this keep happening to me?" Rue thought. Rue, still strong at socializing, convinced 3 more rhubarb to join him under the condition that he wouldn't try to kill any more epics, and reluctantly, he agreed. Who could blame them? No one wanted to become a jam sandwich. But Rue had a vendetta now, a lust for vengeance that couldn't be shaken. If he were to take down an epic, he would have to sacrifice using his own kind as bait and use creatures from other species instead. The prophecy must be fulfilled. He soon found the answer to his problem. With a keen eye, Rue observed a mighty creature as it obliterated a nearby nest site. The adult rogue possesses a remarkable advantage over its counterparts, an astonishing health pool 3 times larger than that of an ordinary creature. He would be unstoppable with 3 of these guys in his group, Rue thought. And so our rhubarb returned to some of his refined social skills. He was a peculiar sight, a vegetable like no other, singing and dancing with such fervor. The rogues, notorious troublemakers of the jungle, were equally enthralled by this peculiar spectacle. Soon, a Porcotimus joined the team, and many others like a mischievous Porcu and a spirited Suajin, causing quite a stir in their wake. Though there were a few dissenting voices amongst the ranks of the monkey boys, they were soon silenced, and the allure of this odd vegetable's charm proved too strong to resist. With 3 rogues on tow, Rue didn't waste any time looking for his next epic, the Lommies that taught him his first lesson. Rue led the charge, yet despite a long fight and the best efforts of the rogues, the Lommies only lost a mere 20% of its health. To finish it, Rue continued a dance of death, kiting and spitting. Yet again, his best tactic was to fall on his natural vegetable camouflage and spit sour rhubarb juice. There was a pattern emerging. In frustration, the Lommies made a run for it, Rue repeatedly spitting to try and hold its attention right past an epic trigger morts. But they weren't interested in each other, only some rhubarb jam. Even so, the epics were no match for a spitting vegetable. Confused, another epic was subject to Rue's party trick, standing still and striking from plain sight. Yet still, this was a tireless exercise, taking many days to finish the epic. He had partied with a group of rogues, some of the most powerful creatures on the island, yet they were no match for an epic. Was there another way? Anything that might prove his species was more than just tools to stand still and spit on their enemies. Driven by vengeance, Rue had one last trick up his sleeve. Could he befriend an epic? With but a single epic in his posse, his rhubarb power would be unmatched. And so the rhubarb sought to impress an epic creature. Despite his best dance moves, epics were foul-tempered and only wanted to kill him. This would have to do, with Rue leading the epic on a dance through the undergrowth. It was a tense ride. He saw an epic chompy in the distance. Perhaps his new posse member would fight for him after all. After some considerable faffing, the 2 epic creatures slashed at each other grumpily. But ultimately, our target only lost 2/3 of its health. It was no use. He would have to finish the epic the only way he knew. He stood still and spat the epic to death. Indeed, it seemed that an epic could be slain by a rhubarb, although this had cost the rhubarb species dearly. What started as a desire to protect his family had consumed the rhubarbs and twisted the future of their species. The grandma prophecy was fulfilled, and as time passed, rhubarbs lost their ability to fly and converse. They evolved to stay still, firmly planted in the ground, waiting for an epic to pass. After the epics went extinct in the tribal stages, many generations of rhubarbs lost their ability to spit, yet their sour juice never lost its potency.